Hi, welcome to How to Be a Humane Leader Without Losing Your Job. We're here to chat about humane leadership in a way that's real and relatable, tackling work life challenges, and offering practical advice to navigate tough decisions. Whether you're leading a team or navigating your career, we got you covered. I'm Roberto Torres, a software engineering leader, and with me is Chris Ollerkin, a Fortune 100 IT leader. We'll dive into the real world stuff, share experiences, and offer guidance on leading with compassion while keeping your career on track. Today, we will discuss how to manage with stress as humane leaders and for our team as well. Hi, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Roberto. I'm feeling pretty good. I'm not feeling too much stress. How much stress are you feeling?
I'm not having any stress at all.
Well, we both have our tropical backgrounds on, so of course that's one way for many people to manage their stress is to think of the tropics in that relaxed kind of Caribbean, South Southern lifestyle, right? Is more relaxing, and that's certainly a way for people to try and manage their stress, right? Is to picture and imagine a place that is relaxing to them, whether it's Caribbean and tropical climates, or maybe it's downhill skiing and the winter wonderlands. But certainly having the perspective of places that calm you can help you manage your stress.
Yeah, indeed. But actually, I think that being without stress is when you leave work, if you're working on site, or when you are finishing your work days, duties, and closing your laptop is nothing related to that. Is saying, "Ah, great, I can do stuff for myself," rather than saying, being so energetic all the time and having all these thoughts in your mind. I think that is what differentiates stress from the one that it isn't.
Yeah, definitely. And everyone has their own kind of comfort level for those cycles, whether something is
Mhm.
really stressful
Mhm.
or up and down excitement level. And I think when we're trying to help our teams through the peaks and valleys of our work day, work week, work month, work year, there are cycles to what the stress level is. Certain companies maybe have peak stress at the end of the month because they're trying to get orders out the door, or maybe some companies their stress peaks are around the quarter end because they're a public company and they're trading and they want to hit certain numbers for the end of the quarter so that when they announce public numbers. So every place is a little bit different. And what I've found most um, helpful in managing the stress was generally just trying to set goals that I could reasonably accomplish. I think one of the big stressors is when companies get overly enthusiastic, let's say, and they set something what we used to call stretch goals. And these stretch goals were just so far out there that 90% of the people would look at them and say, there's just no way I can do that. So they wouldn't work on that goal at all because a failure by an inch is a failure by a mile. And so, what really would get done, the bulk of the work that would get done, were the achievable goals, things that were like, look, I can get this done in a reasonable amount of time and be successful. And our teams, while maybe they don't always consciously kind of methodically think through it that way, that is the behavior I observed over 35 years. So, when I'm trying to help my teams through stressful times, and maybe there is this big stretch goal we're trying to go after, set some smaller goals within that are absolutely achievable so that they have that sense of accomplishment. And that can make a big difference in your stress level. That as you look at day to day, week to week, month to month, hey, we did accomplish this, and we did accomplish this, and then we did accomplish this, and it's getting higher and higher. You still may not make the super stretch goal, but if you made 80% of the path, the team can still feel good that they made that stuff done. The top executives are still going to say you didn't hit the stretch goal, but you can do your best to reward the team and support them that they made a lot of good progress and had these smaller milestones that were achievable, were reasonable. And let's face it, when we achieve something, a goal that we set out there, the stress does feel less, right? There's this feeling of accomplishment that is a stress reducer.
Yeah, indeed. The thing is, it begins with us not accepting something impossible to be created because the, when we mention yes to a specific task, we are busted with that. And the thing is, since our reports cannot say they cannot either neither accept nor reject, they have to look at what we can say yes or we can say no. One thing that is important to for you to know is that here in Latam, and I mean from Mexico way down to Chile, all these countries, most people cannot say no. And the thing is, because it's a cultural thing, because there can be many different factors, but saying no is something important. But when you say no, you have to provide an answer of what should be done, rather than why they shouldn't be doing that. So it's really important, as you mentioned, to say no, and to say which task could be fractioned in order to be delivered. One thing also is we're talking about stress at work, but what about if we have stress in our personal life? How is going to affect that to our work? Is it going to be uh, a decision that could change or could affect our work life? It's really, really possible to do that. So imagine saying yes to a stretch goal, as you mentioned, having stress in our personal life is going to be a new bomb. No.
Yeah, it is additive. I mean, all of the research studies say stress is additive. So if you have a stressful situation at home and a stressful situation at work, maybe stressful things with aging parents, et cetera, unhealthy children, all those things add up. And so, all of a sudden, your stress bucket, the amount you can manage, is overflowing when you have stress in all those situations. I'm not a great life coach, so I won't get into too much on how to manage your stress outside of work. But I do think a lot of the same kind of guidance applies to home or in the office, and that is, if you can determine what is one of your big stressors, whether it's at home or work, try and take that big stressor down a bit. So in other words, if you've got one thing that's 75% of your stress and then you got 25 other things that are little, don't try and manage all the little ones. If you can take your big stressor and reduce that by half, you will have made the biggest impact, right? So what is stressing you? What is the big thing that's challenging you? Is it this, big project at work that's just unachievable? Well, hey, your team is probably feeling the same way. Check with them. Yeah, this is the biggest stressor in my life too. Now we've got something we can focus on, right? And now we can try some of the techniques to take that big stressor, break it down into smaller pieces. Maybe some aspects of it are just impossible, right? Because they depend on, if I'm a farmer, it depends on the weather. I can't really control that much. So I can't manage that. But if some of my stress is that my equipment might fail, then this applies in the corporate world or the farming world or anything. Well, what can we do about managing that stress? Can we have some redundancy? Can we do more regular maintenance checks? That same thing applies in the corporate world. Okay, if we are concerned about the project not being able to make it, let's break it into smaller pieces. Can we break up the project into compartments we can manage with real metrics that make us feel more secure that we're making these progress on the goal? One of the things that we always worked on was, is it objectively measurable? In other words, could I argue, in my opinion, it's done? This stressful part of the project is done, or is it subjective, meaning I could say it's done and you say it isn't? That in and of itself can be a cause of stress within a project, right? So if you can make some of these deliverables objective, meaning it's a yes or no, look, I can show you the metrics, it is completely done, and now we can check that off the list. That's going to really help you manage the stress on these kinds of things, because no one can then argue with you. And for me personally, arguments are a big stressor in my life. That's the kind of thing I always try and avoid arguments, and I try and do that with using objective facts.
Totally agree. Yes, you had a bullseye on the stress that usually goes on at the workplace. The thing is, if you're being biased and not unbiased, it's because you don't have hard data that says if you're going to the right track or the opposite. The thing is, for that, let's say that we have a manager. Well, we have to talk with our manager regarding what are their expectations versus what are we having in reality. Are we going on the right track or not? Are our manager having realistic expectations of us or not? We have to communicate for that. If we fail to communicate, it's going to be a really, really big problem. That happens the same as humanities with our team. We have to have realistic expectations of what's going to happen and communicate with them, and they have to communicate with us. They cannot be silenced in this. And also, one thing that is important, and I will go with a personal stress that might happen, is if they're facing a problem, what I usually suggest is, can you do exercise that will help ease down the stress. If it's something bigger that nor a communication with me nor a exercise can do, is if it's possible and feasible to talk with a therapist, do it, because that way you will have an totally objective person who's going to talk with you, a specialist, and who is going to guide you through this crumbly road in order to be in a road which has no rocks, no problems at all. And for that, let me tell you, uh, I usually go on a monthly basis with a therapist, and I don't go excuse me, I don't go for specific things, but the things that have been going at the office, at the work, at the company. And this guy is really good and provides me with stuff, not the answers, with the questions that I had to do in order for me to take the action, to take the answer, and go straight. So I think it's a good way to manage my stress, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And surprisingly, some of those physical things, like you're talking about, whether it's exercise or talking to a therapist or talking to a close friend that knows enough about the situation to be honest with you, not to be your best friend, right, and just tell you you're totally right, Roberto, everything, you're absolutely right. That's not going to be helpful. You need a friend who will be honest with you and say, Roberto, I think you need to rethink this a little bit and think about where you are in your career and what kind of stress do you want to take on, in your job and role and so on. A friend who can be honest. But even physical things like just getting outside and just taking a walk during that stressful moment where you're making the decisions. Let's say the job, wants you to make some decision that is really important to the whole team. Maybe it's about hiring a new leader. Maybe it's making a decision to divide the team into parts and have leaders for each of those. Or maybe it's a negative thing like, hey, we need to let 10% of the people go. Sometimes just getting outside away from your office and taking a walk, whether it's around the building or maybe you're big in a big corporate campus, you might have walkways. We had walkways you could go on, walking trails that you could go on at ours because it was a stressful place. A lot of people would see taking a break, taking a walk to think about something deeply. Those are good ways to manage that stress. All those different techniques, those physical, hey, I did it. It will make a difference. It doesn't bring it to zero. I don't think anything's zero stress, but we want our stress to be manageable, because the one good thing about stress is it usually motivates you to get something done because you want to get out of the stressful situation. That's the other thing to think about. Our goal here is not zero stress. Stress motivates you to get out of the stressful situation, build something, finish something, get it off your plate kind of situation. So do realize too that the goal is not zero stress. It's managing the stress. And if the stress is too high, managing to bring it down to a level where it is manageable, right? Both for ourselves and for the team. And people's stress levels that they feel are comfortable with, right? They're not all the same. So you may have certain team members where you might need to break up the stressful task into smaller pieces for them versus other team members that manage stress better. Maybe their stress bucket is bigger. Maybe they don't have as much stress at home, so they can take a little more stress at work, whatever the situation is. But just realize that we're not all the same, and not everybody is going to manage stress the same. And you'll have to figure that out with your team, which of these physical techniques of therapist or mindfulness thinking about what's going on, or breaking the task into smaller parts. Figure out what works for each team member as you manage these stress buckets, right? And help coach your team for them to figure out what is it that's going to work for them best. At a certain point of my life, exercise was my big stress reliever. My current stress reliever currently is a walk in the woods, or take the dogs for a walk. Just different things work at different times of your life too.
Yeah, and each person has different stress relievers, as you mentioned. For me, it's playing chess. I play chess on a daily basis. Sometimes I just exercise, and sometimes I play against someone at the world. But in the end, it allows me. Or for instance, yesterday I walked. I walked like 8 miles. It was something that allowed me to diffuse. And one thing that I think is really important is most people, I think, doesn't recognize the level of stress they have. So what I will do is take my as an example. If you go to a hospital and you're being a room because you're going to have a surgery, or you're being in pain, there is on a, on a board, there is these numbers that tell you how much in pain are you, from 1 to 10, 1 being green, 10 being red. And you have to understand, in the case, not in pain, but in stress, where are you? Are you on a 2? What do you have to do not to be a 1? Are you an 8? Do not go from 8 to 1. It's impossible. You have to go 8 to 6, maybe to 4, to 2, and then to 1. Do small actions, as you mentioned before, rather than saying, I'm going to do the whole enchilada of this project. No, try is down little by little, because otherwise it will be a stressful situation to go from 8 to 1, and it's going to skyrocket from 8 to 12. So you have to be aware of that situation. and people understand where they are and what they had to do. There's no one who's going to tell you what do you what should you done in order to decrease that stress. It's up to you to know what has to be done. And for that, let me tell you that when some engineers team we were on a maybe close to a burnout state, I usually told them, okay, what do you do to lower down your stress? And some people tell me I take a shower, I go on a walk, I talk with my mom, I play video games. Well, you know what to do, to delete that or lower down your stress.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned, you can't go from, 10 to 1. That's part of that incremental success that helps people manage stress. Because if you do set the goal for yourself to go from 10 to 1, then that fails and that adds more stress. But to set a goal to go from 10 to 8, that's achievable. And once you've achieved eight, try to get it to 6, right? So, people need to realize that just recognizing you're under stress is step 1. That's a good step. Success. Step 2, what are some of the techniques I'm going to try? Step 3, hey, another success. We're trying certain things. And then figure out which ones work best and do more of that and less of the things that don't work. Because if some of those techniques don't work, don't keep doing them just because you read it in a book somewhere. That's the other thing. People, there are some general guidelines around stress that we've been discussing, right? These are general things that universities and doctors kind of suggest patients try. But even they say, look, it doesn't work for everybody. You've got to find your own thing. This is just kind of a laundry list of different techniques for you to try for yourself, different techniques that you try and coach your team to try, and make sure that they realize that for some people, talking to their mother might be really stressful, right? Maybe she's one of those moms that's really critical. Roberto, how come you're not a billionaire yet? Oh, and I don't have 50 grandchildren. Oh, you're such a disappointment. Well, then that's really stressful versus a call with your mom that says, Roberto, you're doing so, I'm so happy that you did that. I love your wife, and I'm so glad when you guys can make it here to visit me. You travel so far to see me. I'm so happy about it, right? Those are 2 phone calls to your mom, but which one's stressful and which one's helping you relax? So everybody's got to realize, what is working for them. And and to some degree, you got to kind of avoid things that add stress.
Yeah, but you have to celebrate when you're lowering down that stress. If you celebrate and you are acknowledge this achievement, is going to be really good for you.
Yes.
It's going to know, oh, I celebrate because I did this and I did that, and I feel better. And not only myself, but the people who are with me is going to skyrocket the mindset for you to become well. You know?
Yes, your reduced stress will cascade into the team. They will feel it. They will. So if you can manage, if the least you can do is manage your own stress, it will help the team because they will see that you're feeling less stress, which will reduce their stress. Absolutely true. Completely agree with you.
Yeah, not only as a human leader, but also as a team member, a team report, because it will spread out to the whole team.
Yes, exactly. Absolutely agree.
Great. Well, I think with this, we're going to end this episode. We're going to talk more about it by future episodes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Have a stress-free weekend, Roberto.
You too, man. Thank you.